Hello and welcome to episode 17 of building a 2D Flutter game that has multiplayer support. Um, we having some issues with this machine today. I hope this will not kind of affect this episode as well. That's why the last episode, episode 16, was a bit shorter. As always, we start by tagging our episode 17 start. What we did last episode was to add some collisions for bullets. They kind of look almost acceptable, but not quite as cool as it could be. So what we'll do instead, we'll add a sprite here to make a real explosion happen, right? And again, as you know, I did this before with by using a framework called Flame. So I have some of these things already prepared. So what we're going to do is I'm going to paste in this image that I already have. It's called explosion. So let's call it bullet explosion because we might have other explosions in the future. So this will automatically be imported because here we have to restart our game though when we add assets. But basically, in the we already say we want to import everything in the sprites asset folder. So everything that's in there will automatically be kind of loaded into our executable by Flutter. Now, what we have to do though is we have to create another asset. So for every asset, we have this assets class here. So if you, for instance, go to here, we have an image asset for all these things. And as you can see, it's kind of getting slower. My machine is kind of getting packed here. OBS is taking a lot of CPU, and then there are other things going on. So we will have to live with it, unfortunately. Restarting didn't really fix it earlier, so we'll have to just make it work anyways. So what I'm going to say is there's a bullet explosion, right? That's the asset we're going to create. And it's basically an image asset, right? And now come the interesting parts. So I'm actually going to split my IDE here to fill these incorrectly. So split. What we do, we're going to look at the explosion over here. So as we can see, this is the image sprite, and this is we talked about this earlier how sprites work, right? Basically, we have different frames of the explosion animation, right? So we have 4 columns and 4 rows, and the overall size of the image is 256 times 256. So in our image asset, we have to first of all provide that the path. So we're gonna say bullet explosion, right? And then we need to give it the size 256 and 256, and then we have rows. We have 4, and we have 4 calls as well. Okay, so now and this doesn't look pretty, so we're going to do it this way. Now what we'll have to do is we have to load this image asset as well. So game props.assets dot the bullet explosion, and we're basically going to take the image path to load. And now what we're going to do, we're going to use our sprite sheet animation that we already created for the thrust of the player, right? We're going to use that same class to basically perform this animation. As you can see, it has an update method and a reset method. The reset method we won't need in this case because we will create basically a new sprite sheet animation for each of those bullets, right? Because we might have multiple in our game at the same time. So now let's look through the code that actually is using already this kind of class here. We're gonna see where we're already using that. So for the thrust sprite, so we're going to create something like that for the explosion as well to keep this all kind of together. So what we'll do, we'll close this over here, And we'll keep the thrust sprite open here to kind of get, remind ourselves how this works. And then we'll create, so where do we have the thrust? Where we have this inside of sprites. So inside of sprites, we're going to create a new sprite, and we call it bullet explosion sprite. Okay. So we'll move that to the other site. And so we're going to have a bullet explosion. And actually, to be totally correct, we'll probably rename our class here, because everything in sprites is called sprite. This is useful if you start trying to find files quickly. Bullet explosion. Basically, by the ending of the file, even though they're already sorted by folders. But if I do something like this and I want to see all my sprites, right, I can do this, or better shown if I show all my files, right, if I do this, now it's going to show me all the sprites. Or if I just even do this, now I can see thrust sprite, bullet explosion sprite, and so on. So that's why I like to name these files like that too. You might find it anyway. So if I do levels, yeah, it still finds it by lib. Right, it finds these that are in those folders. Well, we might, yeah, it doesn't matter what naming convention we have. It's not that important. For now, we'll do this way. So first of all, we need the image asset, and that is basically it's not our thrust asset, but it is the bullet explosion asset. The sprite sheet animation we will create, and we will give it width and height as well. And as you can see, like I'm copying and pasting a lot, and that's not a problem. If we ever decide that we want to create a base class for things like that, we can. For now, I want to keep things simple and kind of discover slowly but surely what kind of things make sense to pull out. I'm not too worried that there is something to be said for thinking early about pulling things out, but also there are disadvantages to pulling something out too soon, because then you're afraid to change it, because now so many things depend on the same thing, and now suddenly they actually have different requirements, and you don't find out until later. But pulling this out later might actually be easy enough. So we have the same kind of thing here. Update the same. So we kind of see that it is pretty much the same. It is pretty much the same, except for the render method, most likely, right? But actually, this code is not so much. It's just basically initialization code. So we'd have to pass in the image asset anyways, and then we might save like a little bit of constructor calls. But basically, we're not really copying any logic, right? It's just some boilerplate. And when you reset this, the question is if you ever want to actually reset that, because we're not going to use, we can't share the animation, right? You might have multiple bullets exploding at the same time. They each need to have their own animation. Otherwise, they'll start affecting each other. So we can't share the animation. So there's also no point in resetting the animation. And we might actually think about this the same way for the thrust of the player, because once we have more players, right? Once we show enemy players and we want to show their thrust as well, we're going to run into the same issue. But for now, this hasn't been a problem yet, so we are probably fine. So here we render. Okay, now the render method is going to be a lot different. We will need the canvas. And as always, I'm going to show, I'm actually going to put this here as well. As you see, like the canvas, you can import from multiple places. So I wanted to be clear that it's coming from the lower level .ui. So this is just going to be the bullet center now, right? And then we don't need the player width at all because we just have a center. So this will actually be a lot easier. Pretty much all we really have to do is we take this method here where we render the sprite sheet animation, and instead of giving it offset 0, we give it the actual center, because as you remember, like over here, what we were doing, we actually, well, we need this as well. We're actually moving the canvas to where we want to put the thrust, and then we do all kinds of translations and rotations and things, and then now we're already where we want to render it, so we just render it as 0. In this case, we don't have to do any of that. We'll just render it as is, and then we'll just pass it the center directly. So that should actually work at this point. So basically now what will have to happen is there's one problem, right? Because this expects us to pass an DT. And why is this a problem? Well, we're going to see in a second here. So we'll keep this open. Close this. We don't need this anymore. Well, actually, you might need the spreadsheet animation in a second. What we actually have to do is we have to open the bullets. So as you can see, when we update the bullets, we have something here, MS to explode. Right. We were kind of keeping the state of how much time is left to explode in the model, right? And that's actually not really necessary. So basically, knowing where the player is and so on, right? So let me actually restart. So knowing where the player is, that is kind of something we want to have in the model. Knowing the player's speed is something we want to have, because that's something that the server actually also wants to know, because the server has to show, the server has to basically show the player and so on, right? We also have to know where the bullets are. But once the bullet is exploding, that's kind of an the bullet that it is exploding, like the animating this, that's not really a server thing. That's certainly client side. So we basically just need to say it is exploding, and then basically once it is exploding, the UI can kind of take care of it. What basically could happen is, basically what I'm saying is, so it's exploding, right? But we don't care anymore. The bullet has hit and it is exploding, and that's all we need to know. The fact that it still like shows it exploding is not really important at all, right? That's not really necessary for anyone to know, to calculate anything. So server doesn't actually have to know this. So actually, what I'm trying to think of is that maybe we need to have a list of exploding bullets here, right? And basically what we'll have, we have a list of bullet explosion sprites, right? That we put here, call it exploding bullets, right? And then we basically, what we'll do is we need to set on the model that it is exploding first. So we need to set we need to set a bool that it is exploding now, and that will be only queried one time for everyone to know that this bullet is now set to explode. So we're saying exploding. Or actually, it's more correct to say collided, right? Collided, and if it collided, so now actually we can make this much simpler. Here also we just say bullet collided, right? And we remove all this code. And what we'll do, we don't need this anymore. Well, we still actually need this, but we call it just collided. Basically, just in this loop, we found out that it's now colliding. And then basically what we'll do is we will, well, first of all, let's clean up a little bit here. So we don't need this anymore. And we don't really need this anymore at all. And so basically what we do is instead we have another method and we copy, don't need the bullet. We just need the bullet explosion sprite. Okay, under explosion. So that's a whole different thing now. So if the bullet collided, then the just collided, we add the bullet. And if the bullet basically, if you find out that that it needs to collide, we set that to true. Now we have to be really careful here, right? This has to this code has to always run before this, right? We cannot we cannot say if bullet collided. Now we do this code right away. Basically, what we want the model to have collided. Well, that's fine. We're not changing. We're not changing anything about the model afterwards. So basically, once the bullet collided, we're basically done with that model. But we can't remove it yet immediately because we need, once we send the list of the bullets, right, to the server, for instance, the server needs to find out, oh, there's a bullet that now collided. So we can't immediately remove that. So we can't do that, actually, what we have here. So they actually... And so, so we can't do that here, but the things we're setting this here, right? And we'll rename this collided in previous frame, just to be clear what we're trying to do here. So basically, the ones that collided in the previous frame now will have the collided set to true, right? And then for all these bullets that are collided in the previous frame, we'll remove them now. But basically, at that point now, the server has gotten our message that that bullet collided. That's one way. Obviously, the server might also actually run. So I think we were thinking maybe we're making this a little bit too complex to think about the server already. But the server actually could also run this controller code and find out itself that the bullet needs to collide, right, with the wall, and then do all this code. But for now, we want to set it. We want to set a flag on the bullet to mark it basically that we in the next frame we need to start doing something about the collision, which in this case we do. We remove the bullet. But basically, what we also will do is we'll add to our sprites bullet, or what is it, exploding bullets. We're going to add a sprite, and so basically we're gonna have a void create bullet explosion, and so basically all we're doing there is we're returning, and this is not void, this is a bullet explosion that we're creating. So this is a bullet explosion sprite. And we need to pass the width and the height. So for now, so we had a radius, right? So we'll just keep the radius for now as the width and the height. So width is the radius, and the height is the radius. And what we may be doing, going to do is kind of kind of, maybe multiply that with something to make the explosion slightly larger or slightly smaller, however you want it. But we're not going to have another new property. We're just going to base it off the radius of the original bullet. And then we need to have the milliseconds. And so we have that already. We have ms to explode. So, and that's going to be the animation duration. Okay. Okay. So now we are creating that. So then what we'll do, we'll add to exploding bullets, we add create bullet explosion. Okay. Okay. So now, and so now basically what we'll do is we just then in the update method, right? We go through all our bullet explosions. Explosion in bullet exploding bullets. We then basically just update those exploding. So the explosion, or let's just say it's also still a bullet, so it's just named bullet dot update dt. So now the explosion updates itself, and we don't have to actually keep track, right? So before we were trying to keep track, like how much time do we have left to explode, we're counting all this, setting to null and all stuff. So now we don't have to do any of that. And then basically here in the render explosion, we're just gonna, we might actually not even need this method at all. We can just, in the render method, we can just say, for the exploding ones, right? Bullet dot render. Let's give it the canvas. Okay, and so this is an interesting thing. It wants us to know where to render it. It wants us to tell it. And that's not what we want, because the center doesn't change, right? We actually want to pass that center in here as a field. And see, that's where it starts, when I said earlier, like you might want to pull out a base class here, but now suddenly we have a different thing here where we actually want to, and actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to make that like the first parameter, because that kind of makes sense. So right now suddenly we have different requirements just for our bullet sprite, and now if you would have like pulled out something already, we wouldn't have been too happy. And so basically we can now pass the center in here, and then pass it in as the first parameter. And now when we call it, we're going to pass it as well. Basically the bullet wherever it is currently, the top position dot to work position dot to offset. I'm actually thinking maybe I should go in here and make a shortcut for this. This is just getting to offset, and basically what that is basically to world position dot to offset. Right, it's just a nice little shortcut. So now I can basically say to offset, which was much nicer. Okay. Nice. So we are now adding exploding bullets. We're adding them at the right offset. Exploding bullets, we need to initialize it with like a list, right, of a bullet explosion sprite. Okay. So obviously what's still missing is removing the explosion themselves. So we update the bullet, right, and then we have to go. We'll worry about that later. But basically, like once the animation says I'm done, we need to remove them. We won't actually see a problem yet because most likely they won't render, because what we have here is like, well, if I'm done, return. But the thing is, the bullet might, like the animation, it might still be in the list, taking up memory. And then also we always call it for no reason at all, and we keep updating it. Also, like here, we probably want to say, if it's done, don't update anymore, right? So yeah, that's fine. So for now, probably things will work, but we still need to take care of this later on. Random explosion, we don't need this anymore. Who's still calling this? We don't. Yeah, so we made a mistake here. We still need to render the bullet, and I think we kind of removed that code now by accident. Good, we have source control. So let's see. So actually, this is the code that we want, right? So this was the code. We kind of kept the wrong code around. Okay. Let's see. There might be some issue because, okay, getting was called on null. Okay. Why is it? Okay, so that was just because we hadn't restarted yet. Okay, so there are two options again. There's one where you can just do a hot restart or hot reload. If you do a hot reload, some things may not get reinitialized properly because it's basically trying to continue where you were. So then you need to do a hot restart. Okay, so here we got this. Let's shoot. Okay, so if immediately we have some sort of a bug. Boolean expression must not be null. Okay, so somehow collider add returns null. I think that's happening actually here, yeah. Pretty sure. Or maybe we're passing failed assertion. So when we update the bullets, let me make sure we're passing this method incorrectly. Yeah. So I wonder what's null here. Maybe the top position isn't set on the bullet yet, but we're setting it right here, right? So, I mean, the move will never return null. So I'm not sure. So I'm actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to restart the entire game. Maybe something is still wacky. So you can see like why everything is slow. OBS is taking a bunch of CPU, and then there's some other things going on. But at this point, it's mainly OBS. It's deciding to take like 500%, almost 400 something percent, which I'm not too happy about. And I'm not fully understanding why that's even happening. Because I'm not aware that I even updated OBS. I hope this will get better soon. But you can see that everything is horribly taking a long time. So, well, maybe while this is restarting, we might then think about what could be null here, right? So saying a Boolean cannot be null. Oh, maybe it's actually this one here. Maybe we can say collided. We start with false. So maybe actually that was a problem. That we never initialized collide. So maybe if we get the same error now, that might have been it. Okay, even though now we didn't get any of this. So now we're getting it again. So now let's refresh. Okay, let's do a hard restart. Okay, same problem. Okay, let's look at this a little more closer. So we're getting this right here, right? If bullet collide, okay, if bullet collided, right? And so basically we now just changed that. It might not have picked that up yet. So we did a change here where bullet collided will be initialized to false now whenever bullet model is created. So I don't know where it would be null now. And then here we're setting it to true. Oh, and then actually what we need to do is once we, oh well, and then we remove it though, right? Once it was collided in previous frame, it disappears, right? So let's try one more time to reset this, because now actually we are setting, and it might not have picked that up yet. That fix. So that's still from the old version here. Okay, so now we restarted. Let's see now. Still the same problem. Boolean expression must not be null. I have no idea how it would be null now, because now we're setting it to false. And bullet can also not be null, right? I mean, then it would already have failed up here. I want to kind of restart again, and I know this is painful. I want to restart because now we did change it, right? We fixed it, and I feel like maybe it's not picking it up. Maybe it's just not. But I mean, why would it not pick it up, right? Because we're creating, where are we actually creating these bullet models? So we're creating the bullet model here, and so collided is by default false, right? I mean, it's not null. We can clearly see that here. This collided is false. So I'm not sure where it's getting the null from, but we'll definitely track it down. Obviously, like, you know, having this computer crawling a little bit is making this a little bit harder. I hope our sprite animation will work, because we haven't tried it yet for different rows and columns, right? So the sprite sheet animation depends on the sprite sheet, and we have taken rows and columns into account. And actually we have used the sprite sheet for the floor tiles. So we actually already proved that this works in a way. So actually, I'm just trying to think ahead here. Like once we get this working, once we fix our little bug that we seem to have, if we're actually almost there or not. So we're waiting for this. This is a little bit daunting, but basically, like, we can see what's happening. So let's think through the code again. So if the bullet collided, we added to the colliding previous frame, good, and then we added to our exploding bullets. Actually, what we can do now, if a bullet is done, right, we can go ahead. So what we're gonna do? Okay, so now we're starting up here. So I hope this is now fixed. Okay, it is fixed. Good. All right, and we see some animation here. It's just too small. Can you see that? Right. So we see our sprite animation, and actually, what we're doing now, though, we're creating all kind of huge. We're creating this huge list of stuff. So what we actually need to do is we need to outside of this loop. Actually, we need to go through. Exploded, right? Exploded bullets, and that's actually a list of sprites that bullet explosion sprite. And basically, what we need to do, we need to go through this one, and we say if bullet.done, if right, but we checked it before we update it. And if it's done, then exploded bullets. The bullet. I mean, the bullet in this case is a sprite sheet, right? And so now then we go to all these exploded ones, exploded bullets. Well, actually, we might just make this a little nicer. But we could say we're gonna try to do this a little different. We had all these for loops here. We're trying to do this a little different. So exploding bullets dot remove where. There's a function here where we can say remove where, and then basically we say bullet dot done. And let's just make sure that this actually modifies the list in place. Yes, it does. It returns void. So and then the thing is, we don't need the collider premise frame anymore. We can actually do this here. So we can actually remove this also this way. So basically we can say bullets, right? Bullets. That looks a little bit nicer. Remove where, right? And then we have the bullet, and we say bullet dot collided, right? And now we don't need this anymore. We don't need. Oh, but we have a problem, right? We still need to add. Yeah, that's not nice. So in this case, actually makes more sense to do it that way, like we had it, because we also have to add this to. Yeah, otherwise we'd have two wheres. It's nicer like that actually, but here it makes a lot of sense, right? So now we should actually be able to refresh, and things should still work. We shouldn't see a difference, except that now basically our bullets get actually removed. The exploding sprites disappear and they don't stick around forever. Now we just have to make our explosion radius a little bit larger. Size is radius. Let's say I think I make it. Let's make it 5 times as big to really see something. Size, and we also might actually get a different size for width and height. We'll see. Okay, now that looks better already, right? Okay, cool. So we have some, and what we're actually gonna, what we're actually gonna do is just for fun, to see this better, we're gonna loop. So the explosions will keep going forever, which means they also will never get removed. So now we should be able to see now. Okay, yeah. So the looping doesn't really work. So that's an interesting thing. We need to actually fix that. So if you're looping, right, if it's basically done, but we're saying here, if you're looping, maybe then also we need to set the clock back to 0. Let's see about that. Okay, now they are they are kind of doing this, right? Okay, so now we can kind of see the explosions as they're happening. And what we can do now is, just to see this a little better, we can change in our game props. We can change the time to explode. So if we make that like 2,000 seconds, and more likely we'll have to restart. Okay, now yeah, we have to do a restart instead of reload. And normally that's faster, but again, my machine is being hogged. Something is hogging CPUs and everything. Okay, so now we can see how that's happening, right? We have these looping animations now, and here's one interesting thing, right? You can see this one bullet was moving so fast that by the time we detected it to be in the other tile, it was already here, and that's probably something we need to fix. But okay, we see the looping, we see the animation works pretty enough. We don't want the loop anymore, so we'll change this back. And we do a little refresh, and then we should be fine. And so we'll check that in. So look at all those things we changed. We added the explosion. We added the bullet explosion. We just renamed that, I guess. No, I don't know. File not found. Yeah, I named that something else. I named that Sprite. So why are you confusing me? Anyway, so this is our bullet explosion sprite that we created, right? And it basically uses the sprite animation on the hood. And so the code is now pretty simple. The bullet model, we changed. The model now no longer takes care of tracking the explosion. It basically just sets a flag. And the only reason for that we set a flag once and then remove it from the bullets is because we want to signal to the server once we use one that, hey, there's a bullet that's exploding, update yourself. So the server can then basically send that same information to the other clients, and they can show exploding bullets. Here we are. Yeah, we changed a bunch of things around because now we're doing things differently here. The model doesn't have to take care of anything anymore, but it's mainly like just, yeah, this kind of looks weird in a div, but it's mainly just removing, creating exploding bullets, which are basically just there for animation purposes, right? They're never going to be part of the model because that's purely UI, the image asset. We fixed our loop here. So actually, let's check that in separately. We want to say the spreadsheet animation, bright. This is part of the engine. Fixing a loop in sprite sheet animation, and I guess it doesn't like it to be one word. So we're checking this in first, and then we're checking the rest, which is this. We'll just say that bullets explosion via sprite sheet. All right. So now we should actually have a clear. Okay. So now we still have like 10 minutes left, 15 minutes roughly. I want to kind of look into why the bullets are exploding in the wrong place. So the thing is, if the game, and we're seeing this probably right now because my machine is slow. So basically, since we're basically moving the bullet to wherever it wants to go, right, according to DT. So we're kind of calculating, okay, this much time has passed. Where would the bullet be, right? So let me actually outline this. So let's say, right, let's say this is the wall down here. So let me actually get a pen. So let's say this is a wall that we are colliding with, right? Let's make it big. Okay. And so the bullet is moving, right? So it's here. and then basically we say, okay, you're here now. We're gonna move you here next, right? And so is it colliding? No, it's not colliding. Now, if the game loop is really fast, we have like these slow movements, right? Because it's moving straight, but I'm not drawing straight. And then once we hit the wall, we immediately know, okay, now it's in that tile, right? However, if the game loop is slow, what we'll see more is like this. Okay, so the bullet is here. This much time passed. The bullet now actually should be here according to my calculations of the velocity and the current position. And now let's say then we were really slow again, and maybe it was really slow, and the bullet actually now should have been here because there was so much time that passed in the meantime that we need to make it go here. So we don't want the bullets to move slower just because our computer is slow, right? It needs to move the same way. But what happens then, which we saw here, is that some bullets, and now we can see it as much anymore, but and I guess here you see it's sometimes still. Some bullets now explode right in the middle of somewhere here, right? So what we need to do actually, we should actually fix that. It's just not trivial how to do this. So basically, we would need to move it to wherever it entered the tile, right? But this now would become, the code would be almost as expensive or as complex as the player code, because we need to figure out where was the bullet before. But actually, it doesn't have to be that complicated. It doesn't have to be so complicated. So basically, what we will do is we will store the previous position equals the bullet dot tile position. Okay. So, and then what we'll do is when we collide it, right? We can say, and this will have to be in a different method. So first of all, it's true, but now we need to correct. So we set the velocity to 0. That's fine as well. But now we basically need to correct the position. So basically, what we can say is, so if the previous position dot row is not the same as the bullet dot tile position dot row, right? So meaning that, okay, so the bullet came, well, let's draw this a little clearer. So if our tile is here, right, and now the bullet was in this row before, and now when it collided is in the new row, we know that it came either from below or above. But actually we're going to say if the row is smaller, it came from below, right? If the row is larger, it came from above. And we only like limit us to these two cases for now. And so what we have to do then is we need to move the bullet back to where it would have hit. So then we say the bullet tile position is basically the tile position of the collider, right? So it's basically we basically need to all we have to actually do is we just need to set the y. The relative y needs to become 0, right? And it doesn't like that because we don't want to modify this in place. So actually what we have to do is we create a method where we can create a new tile position, copy width, and we can change whatever we want about it, except we won't actually mutate the position. Some things I kept mutable, but this actually makes sense to not be mutable. So what we're going to do is we're going to copy all these, in here and remove the final. And change all this ones to commas. And then basically what we're going to do is so we're going to create a new tile position, right? Because we don't want to mutate this one. And basically what we'll do is the column will be, if you pass me a column, right, then I'm going to use that. And actually, like in this case, these are ordered parameters, so it's going to be like this. If you didn't pass me a column, I'm going to use the one that I have right now. So I'm going to use the one of this current tile position. And so then the row, we do the same thing. And the rel x, we do the same thing. And actually in Flutter, you'll find a lot of these copy with methods. Okay, so put a comma there to make this nicer. So now basically we can create a new tile position and we can change whatever we want in it, yeah, without having to write a bunch of code. So basically we're going to say that this bullet tile position is basically the current bullet tile position, dot tile position, copy with, and we'll change the relative y is going to be 0. Does that make sense? So basically we're saying that if you were below us, we're gonna put the bullet below us, and if you were above us, we're gonna put the bullet above us, which means we have to know the tile size, right? So we need to know the tile size for that. Okay, and so we need to pass that in. All right, and so where do we create those? So we need to tile size. And where do we have that? Game props. Okay, game props dot tile size. All right. Made a mistake here. It needs to be required like this. Okay, so now we are happy about that. So now basically what we'll do, we'll set the relative x right to the tile size. So that's basically if the bullet came from above, right? So now let's see how that affects our game. So now let's shoot like we did before. And you can see for a sec. Oh, okay. So basically, if I'm somehow the player is actually able to fire. That makes sense, right? Because the player can actually, as we said, we put the bullet a little higher than the player. So actually, I can fire. Like if I'm basically in the wall, I can fire like this. Yeah, that's really weird. And then basically the row will be the same. I mean, this is kind of an interesting effect. I don't necessarily like. No, but we still have the same problem here. So, oh, that's because we didn't do it for the column here. So let's do it for the column and play around with it a little bit. We're actually going to copy this code because it's going to be very, very simple, similar. It's going to be else, and you can kind of see that we want to definitely move this into a separate. We're going to change a row to call everywhere. We're going to move it in a separate method in a second. So all we have to do here is like we're going to do y x, and so but before we trust our search and replace, we're going to probably just look through this. So if the column is smaller than so if the previous position was smaller, then we want to basically make it it's all that's the nice thing about having everything left, right, centered, right? Left, bottom, centered. Sorry. So. And so what we're going to do, we're going to pull this out. Well, first of all, let's test it. So we check it. Okay, now our explosions are happening always like right at the wall, right? The only thing is if we do this. But that almost kind of makes sense because the player is shooting, maybe he's shooting above the walls. I don't know, but we can fix that as well. We are running almost out of time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull this into a separate method. Handle collision. Right, and we need to pass the bullet in the previous position. Okay, fine. So let's go here. We're gonna move that below the render. I like to have my my private methods always below the public ones. So, okay, so that's nice. And now what we can do, we can try to figure out if we don't place the bullet so far ahead of the player when we fire, right, then maybe that will fix things as well. So let's see, where do we handle? I think we actually handled it in the game. Bullet model, right, increase velocity, bullet force. That's the velocity, but okay, here's the if you just make that a little smaller, let's just make it 0.5, right? And see if that fixes things a little bit. So now we're firing. Okay. Hold on. Do we always? Okay. We need to make sure that. Okay. Now this is better, right? Now we're not. But now it looks kind of stupid because it's coming right out of the player instead of where the gun is, right? Yeah. So that's not. So I mean, this is kind of like working around the real problem, right? There's probably a way how we could, but this would just be like too much work. Maybe we can just fix it this way. I mean, technically we don't want to be able. Okay, this is already still happening. Can you see that? Okay, so let's just forget about this. So let's just say we leave this for now as is. Right. So this works fine. I mean, the thing is, like, probably people will not do this anyways, right? Let's see. So if I fire and fire and fire against directions, so we still have some problem here, though. I think. Yeah, here, right? See that? So we're still firing. Okay, so let's check our code here. So if the row is smaller, then we move it to 0. Okay, fine. So we have it right for the row. If the column is smaller, the column is greater. Yeah, I'm not sure why this is not working. It looks like I'm missing something, but I'm not sure what. So if the previous position was to the right, basically, right? If it was to the right, then basically what we want to correct the tile position to be to the right of where it is now, right? What we could actually do, though. Well, yeah. So I was thinking, what I was thinking is what we could do is when the bullet hits the wall, we just put it back to where it was. But that has the same problem. So now if you hit it, then if the game's really slow, the bullet would explode here. What we're actually trying to do is trying to move it exactly to where the wall starts, right? And I don't understand why this is not working. So let me resync. If this is not working now, we'll leave it as is. And we'll fix it later. Let's see. So actually in that case, it's kind of interesting that my computer is slower at this point. Because these bugs sometimes you don't discover. Okay, so it was, yeah, it was a synchronization issue, right? Yeah, now we can see it's perfect. So it was because I hadn't reloaded fully, and so this part of the code somehow didn't update correctly. Okay, now we can see that this is clearly working, except if we're like right here, right? But then you could argue, well, you are kind of firing, your gun is right on the wall, so we might want to allow that to happen. Otherwise, what we'll have to do is say that if the player is basically, oh yeah, that's like painful. So we just leave it like this for now. It's not going to cause any real problem. It's just only like a graphical flaw, which, you know, some people might actually like it. So we'll leave it. It's fine. I have to move on to other things. So actually, let's look at what we did before it checks this in. So we're just basically passing in the talent styles because the bullet now needs to know that in order to reposition itself. We added this copy method to the tab position so that's actually almost a separate commit. So we'll do that engine, right? And a copy with, because it has nothing to do with the remaining parts. We just needed that, right? To top position, right? Position. Right, we just needed that in the engine so we can use it, but it has really nothing to do with what we were doing. So here the commit would be something more like bullets exploding at wall edges. This works except if the player player gun is already technically inside the wall, which, okay, inside the wall. For now, this is fine, as the effect looks okay. Oh, we'll just leave it like that, right? The effect looks okay. We're not like, it doesn't look too stupid. It actually some people might like it. So we'll leave it. Which brings us to the end of this episode. We're gonna have to tag, as always. Tag episode 17 end. Right, and we push this. All right. So thank you for watching. If you have any questions, now would be a good time to ask. We could add 5 more minutes to have some questions answered. Otherwise, we'll finish for now. So we got the bullets, they're hitting walls. Next, tomorrow, we had this health thing here, which I hope still works, by the way. I have no idea what just happened here. Okay, we got stuck in the wall. That should have never happened though. That must have been also because the computer was super slow and we kind of unfocused again. But basically, like, you can see the health is decreasing here, right? When I hit walls. I mean, I hope it is. Otherwise, we'll have to fix that as well. Yeah, this is decreasing, so we might have to make it decrease more, right? In the same way, whenever you fire, so you could just go crazy, right? But what we'll do is, like, we'll have some ammo. So where if you fire too much, right, you'll run out of ammo. And then, so first of all, though, what we need to do is we need to make sure that when you press once, it only fires once. Like, you can hear me pressing, right? I fire with one shot, I fire 2 or 3. So we'll have to find a way to limit that first. Then we'll make the player run out of ammo, and then we'll basically add a way to gain ammo, right? We're going to put some pickup here, so that if you collect that, basically if the player flies through that, then we can increase our ammo again. And at that point, once we have that working, we could almost argue, right, that we have a minimum game ready to start looking into multiplayer, right? And that's going to be on the weekend coming up. we will look at how does this actually work. We're going to look at interpolation, extrapolation, and basically what we're going to try to do is that first of all we'll keep it single player, but a server will basically do all these calculations that we're doing here, and the client will just send basically the key presses and all these things to the server. And I'm still not sure if I will have the server calculate, figure out if something exploded in the first place or not. But we'll see about that. But basically the way we structured it works in both ways, so we're set up for that. And I hope you come back tomorrow for the next episode. Thank you very much.